r/AskReddit. What happened on the worst day of your life? My husband sent me a text meant for another woman. I'm so sorry. That's horrible. What happened after that? This happened in February 2017. He had been planning to stay with me until June, then leave me for her in June. She lived in another state, and by this point, she had already flown out twice to see and fuck my husband. Their plan was that he would keep quiet about it until he was ready to move out and in with her. She moved to my state in June. The text blew his plan apart early. I had no idea any of this was going on. During her visits, he still went to work and came home at night like it was any other day, though he actually skipped work and stayed in her hotel all day with her. Every other day, he acted normal, like nothing was going on. He called me honey, kissed me. I had no idea, so he left. I was at first devastated. We had been married 24 years. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't function. I lost 40 pounds. I didn't shower. I let my eBay business fall by the wayside. I sat on the couch all day staring at the TV, wishing I was dead. There were two issues. The first, that he cheated on me, and the second, that he left me. I felt like both my arms had been chopped off. After about 6 months of that, I reached out and got some help. I got into therapy. I joined a 12-step support group for codependents. I attended a divorce support group. I purposefully did not date. It's been 2.5 years since that terrible day. I've done a lot of introspection and a lot of healing. I've had a lot of personal growth. I see him in a much different light now. I'm much healthier without him. I no longer love him, nor miss him, nor want him back. It no longer hurts me that he's with someone else. God has been so faithful and good to me. My eBay business is thriving. I own my own home in a high cost of living area and rent out a second small home on my property for extra income. The whole house situation is truly a miracle that God worked out for me. I should be living under a bridge if it were dependent only on my actions. I also now co-lead the codependent group. I reach out to others who are hurting to offer them hope. I tell them, I know you wish you were dead, but it's really going to be okay. It's a process, and you have to go through the process to get to the other side. Grieving and sorrow are part of the process. None of the good things in my life would have happened if I'd stayed married to him. The marriage was very unhealthy. Cheating doesn't happen in healthy marriages, only sick ones. I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, but I also wouldn't trade the experience for anything. I'm not the same person I was when I was married to him. I was in New York for a family vacation. Me, my mom, 2 brothers, and grandparents on mom's side. I was awake at 6 AM for some odd reason, with a text from my nana, dad's mom, saying she wanted me to call her as soon as possible. When I called her, she was sobbing hysterically, telling me my dad was in the hospital from an overdose. At first I didn't think it was that bad. Then she told me his heart stopped numerous times. He was on life support. I immediately woke up my mom and told her, and she understood, telling the rest of my family what was going on. My mom and grandma were in tears. I had a small cry too. About 3 hours back in town, we go to visit my dad. He looks awful. He's connected to all sorts of wires and tubes. He wasn't breathing on his own. His heart wasn't beating on its own. He was on dialysis. Keep in mind, he was in his late 30s. Family starts pouring in. I lead literally everyone from the waiting room to his bedside. Everyone who comes in is crying and sobbing uncontrollably. It's awful. I'm a kind of desensitized person. I did cry a few times, but nothing near to everyone else. I would watch most people, including my cousin who I grew up with, cry hysterically with her sisters. Doctors pulled us into a meeting room to discuss his condition. His brain was swollen, his organs were failing, the medication wasn't helping. We had to take him off. I asked my stepmom to bring my 2 little siblings to see him with me. He has 3 kids, me, 17, my brother Key, 10 now 11, and my sister Maya, who was about 8 to 9 months at the time. My stepmother was in so much pain looking at him. The minute she found out, she had a restraining order against him withdrawn. They had a fight before all this. My brother was quiet. I held him close and told him I love him. My sister kept saying the dad at her every time she was in the room. I don't think she really knew what was going on, but she loved my dad so much. She got passed around a lot in the waiting room, wiping away some tears, giving some sloppy kisses, and making everyone feel better. The child life specialists came in and gave us ways we could remember him, like doing handprints with paint and printing his heartbeat. It didn't feel real. Me and some family friends were poking jabs at him, since the nurses said he could still hear us. He was a bubbly person and loved to joke around. He was also very tall, so we made fun of how he couldn't fit in the bed. When it came time to take him off, I held his hand the whole time. I didn't let go. His hand was so lifeless. They let me give him one last hug. I felt so comforted hugging him, I almost didn't let go. I watched them turn off the monitors and pull out the breathing tube. His chest had small convulsions as he tried to get air. It was heartbreaking. I was the first person to leave the hospital after that. I went straight to bed. For the next few days my phone was flooded with condolences from people who knew him. It was heartwarming. I wasn't sleeping, and we had been ordering food to the house. Nobody had the energy to cook. Fast forward a month. I've connected with family I didn't even know I had. We had a party to celebrate his life. I'm still coping. It doesn't feel real. I almost pulled out of school, and I can barely function. I see so many reminders of him. I made a teddy bear with a heartbeat in it to help me cope, and my counselors, teachers, and classmates are super supportive. I named the bear after my dad's birth name. Although I'm stable now, this was by far the most haunting day. I had to sit and watch my dad die, and there was nothing we could do. I was in 5th grade, about 10 years ago, and I had to wake up early because I was cutting my hair at church for Locks of Love. My alarm went off at 6 AM, and instead of just getting up and getting ready, my parents gathered my siblings and I in the foyer. I was half asleep, but I could tell something was wrong. My immediate thought was someone died. No later than, when I had that thought, my mom told us our cousin Ashley had died. Either still had to go to church and give my hair, receiving the worst haircut ever, and then go to her family's house to be with everyone. Now to understand the impact of that on me and why it makes it the worst day of my life, tied for seeing her in her casket, you need some background. Ashley was about 13 years older than me, if I remember correctly. My family was extremely close when I was young, so the mix of being a little girl and looking up to any older girl I saw and her being the cool older cousin, I was obsessed with her. I wanted to be exactly like her when I grew up. She absolutely hated every kid on the planet except for me and my 2 siblings. Fast forward to maybe 3rd or 4th grade, she had fallen into the wrong crowd and ended up going to jail for a while for stealing prescriptions from the doctor she worked for. I was devastated because being a kid no one told me where she was. All I knew was suddenly she disappeared, and that part of my family never came around anymore. Finally my parents told us, and it was just a waiting game to see when she would get out of jail. The best day of my life was when I got off the bus one day to find her standing there. Then maybe a week or 2 later I was being told that she had overdosed, not sure if accidentally or on purpose, by mixing sleeping pills and painkillers that had been prescribed to her for various reasons. To this day I still cry about her and how she missed out on so much in my life and those around us. I know we would be best friends today if she was still here. Whenever I have a shitty day I look up to my ceiling and I cry and I tell her about my day and try to think what advice she'd give me. Long story short, the worst day of my life was finding out about her death. My little brother was taken from my family. We had raised him from infancy as a foster child. He had been abused by his biological family before we took him in. For 3 years we raised him, loved him, and gave him everything. When the final custody hearing came around, the judge decided to send the boy back to his biological family instead of read the evidence against them. When we were told of this, we were given 2 hours to say goodbye. The last moment I saw him was as the social worker strapped him into the car and said they were going to see his daddy. He started crying and pointed to my father, screaming, "No, that's my daddy." Then the woman drove off. My family was a crumpled mess in the parking lot. We had to go home and pack his things, which was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I've never felt such loss before. I loved him with all of my heart. That judge tore my family apart. My parents got divorced 6 months after he was taken, and I fell into a deep depression that lasted years. My sister, his half-sister, didn't understand where her brother went. She kept asking about him. We couldn't give her an answer because we didn't know what became of him. I dream of him regularly and think of him every day. I'm glad we were able to adopt his sister, though. I probably would have killed myself if she had been taken from us as well. I don't think I could have dealt with the loss. When he is supposed to be 18, I'm going to track him down and see how he is. I won't tell him the full details of how I know him, but I want to see if he remembers me. My family wasn't sad when we learned the judge that did this died a horrible cancerous death. I think it was ass cancer. Fuck that man. I hope he is rotting in hell. He was known for breaking up families. I'd been up all night with my 11-day-old son, who'd just come back from a week in hospital with a suspected infection. He hadn't had any fluids all night or morning, no wet nappies for 10 to 11 hours, and was vomiting yellow. When I put him down to check his nappy that morning, he flopped. Like it was literally like holding a stuffed toy. At that point we called a nurse hotline who immediately sent an ambulance. We get to our local and at first they're concerned he is dehydrated, but believe he was most likely just sick and needed antibiotics. That theory fell in a huge heap fast when they did a scan and discovered his heart was twice the size it was supposed to be, beating rapidly, and the tests came back negative for infection. To do more tests and to try get a drip into him, me and husband had to sit in a separate room and wait. They had 20 goes at putting in and forth, including in both shin bones and his skull, with no luck. Finally the head of pediatrics and 2 other doctors came in with the only update being our son was seriously ill. They weren't sure he would survive and he needed to be transferred to our city's children's hospital as soon as possible because they had no idea what was wrong. We seriously thought he was going to die. He ended up spending a month in the children's hospital and needed 2 open heart surgeries. He's alive and well today, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone. We had a couple of other horrible scares, him needing chest compressions and IQ after his first surgery definitely being one, but this will always stick out as the worst day of my life, because it's the only time medical professionals couldn't tell me everything would be okay. July 26, 2012. This was the day my father passed away. I was 11 at the time. When I was younger I was really a people pleaser and had a hard time saying no to anyone. When my grandfather invited us up for a fishing trip I never wanted to go, but I was the deciding factor and didn't want to ruin it for anyone else so I agreed. That day it was very hot, over 100 degrees outside. I remember climbing into our black SUV, and after peeling out of the driveway I fell asleep shortly after. A couple hours into the long drive up there I woke up to Alabama playing on the radio, my dad slumped over the wheel, and my brother asleep next to me as we were drifting into a semi head-on at 80 miles per hour. Moments before collision I screamed a kind of scream that I could never reenact or replicate today. A scream that embodied the cold sweat that ran through my whole body and settled in my stomach, paralyzing me, the kind of fear you have when you know you're going to die. My dad woke moments before the collision and threw himself in the space between the seat and door to cover me, and he died on impact. When I woke up again our car was up in flames as people who witnessed the crash were desperately trying to pull me from the car. I passed out from the pain of them pulling on my very broken upper body. When I woke up again I blinked through the blood in my eyes from the severe lacerations on my skull and remember just wishing for death to come. I then rolled my head to the side and was greeted with my father's arm just laying in the road without his body. I was airlifted to the hospital and spent a month in the ICU and rehabilitation and then therapy following. What's crazy is that my dad and I had matching injuries, only his were more severe. The only thing that was set apart was that the door crushed his ribs, which caused his ribs to puncture his heart. He saved my life that day and sacrificing his own by throwing himself in that door space. The day has lived on in my memory since, and I had begun to be desensitized to the events of that day years ago. I'm now a pre-med student planning on going into cardiology, hopefully to save the hearts of others. The worst day of my life. Well, here we go. 6th grade. First day of school went decently. 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Good so far, and Friday happened. I was escorted dragged away towards the disabled program office by the head admin of the special ed department. Now I couldn't fight back at what was about to happen. Some background info before we begin. As a female who was 3'11" at the time, shy, and barely autistic, like the farthest edge of the spectrum. Actually wasn't even on the spectrum as it didn't exist at the time. I've always been short, but I'm average height now. The reason I say this is I was introduced to the other students, a really nice girl who was born with a hole in her neck, otherwise fine, no mental problems, and could handle herself just fine. She was 18. Another kid who we'll refer to as him. He was almost 7 feet tall, had a violent case of Down syndrome, and grew up in a family that had no problem thinking women weren't human. Tim was badly antisocial. So when they attempted to make me shake his hand, as I was scared, because the guy was already twice my height, and I had no idea what was happening anyway. Suffice to say, this went badly. Immediately he let out a scream that made me cry, and the other girl back away, as if she knew what was coming. His assistant didn't do crap as he proceeded to rip off my shirt and basically throw me onto a desk. Much worse could have happened if the school officer, who we are going to call Angel as she was the best, actually did something and separated the two of us. Besides the fact I almost lost everything I had to him, I got away with a bruised forehead, thighs, and trauma that only recently had left me. I'm not very religious, but thank God or anything up there it didn't get worse. One more thing, I left that school after that. Went to a great private school, and for the staff, pretty much everyone was reassigned, fired, or promoted in Angel's case. There is more about Angel. I might do a follow-up comment if this gets popular about her. Finally, Tim was taken to our institutional hospital. He was 18, so this was way worse apparently than his past crimes. CPS caught, father arrested due to child abuse, spousal rape, and other stuff my parents weren't there to testify for later in life. Became friends with the wife, who was awesome BTW. And that's about it. That's the worst day of my life. It affected the rest of my life, and still is. After a long day of finals at school, for a year I missed 40% plus of school days. Junior year HS, USA, I got home after pretending to be fine. I was dying inside of stress about the fact that I had failed classes I cared about, programming and choir, and when I laid down, I asked myself why. I got the answer in the form of a rush of a vision of everything I had done to contribute to my situation all at once. It felt like the peak of an acid trip, even though I hadn't done acid at that point of my life. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and after that vision I was basically saying, "What the fuck" to myself in my head over and over again. This is when I heard, out loud, in the female voice of a friend from middle school, "Oh yeah, he's making a big deal out of it alright." I looked over to the window and saw this neon face. It looked like it was rotating but static. Like those optical illusions that move when your eyes float over them. Breathing, like how the peripherals of your vision look on 1G of mushrooms. Again, I hadn't done any psychedelics in my life at this point, only smoked a little weed. It disappears, and I go outside to look for it. The voice becomes more clear and grounded as I step outside, taking on the form of all of my close friends from middle school and high school sitting in a room around a microphone. broadcasting into my brain. They introduce themselves one by one and are all giddily laughing at me while they do it. They tell me to come find them, which is easy to do. I can hear them, just around that house, just around that tree, and so on. What followed was a 3-day psychotic episode. Thankfully I recognized that I was hallucinating about an hour into my adventure. Unfortunately the hallucinations did not like being called out and became quite mean after that. I was having visual hallucinations because I was trying to ignore the voices by hiding in my room all day. I remember specifically going out of my room, looking to my right, and seeing that it was snowing outside. Look, name, it's snowing outside. That was when I broke down and told my parents what was going on. After a while I learned to internalize it and disembody it. It's more of a second thought process that's a little more critical and disagreeable than I'm in my own inner dialogic process. 0/10 would not recommend psychosis. I'm 22, so I'm sure there will be worse days to come. Loss is real, and I have a lot of family members I'm close to who are sick and older, and I recently moved across the globe, so I can't be there. That's hard. But, my worst day so far. I was a freshman in college, and had recently joined a sorority. I was, secretly, because our campus was dry, and I was underage, drinking wine in my dorm room, while watching The Office. I took a photo of my wine glass and Michael Scott talking about his time in jail, and posted it on Snapchat with some caption like, "Priorities" or something. I just wanted to share it for a bit, until the chair of standards messaged me about it, and then I was going to take it down. Instead, a girl from high school messaged me, asking if I knew that a boy I loved very much had killed himself. His name was Jordan, and he'd done musical theater with me in high school. He was Judas in Godspell, I was Robin and Sonia, because we didn't have enough actors. He was Shrek in Shrek the Musical, and I was Fiona. In middle school, I knew him, and a bunch of people, myself included, picked on him. In high school, during these musicals, we grew quite close. He had a bit of a crush on me, but I only cared about him like a friend. He'd confided in me before about how depressed he was. But I was depressed too. Lots of people I knew were depressed. I never knew anyone who had killed themselves, so I figured no one I knew ever would. My world kind of stopped. I didn't go to my classes for a week, but I also didn't cry. I didn't request off work for his funeral. I didn't let myself grieve until last year, my senior year of college, when I wrote about him a few times for my creative non-fiction class. I have always blamed myself for picking on him in middle school, for not liking him back, for not keeping in touch with him after graduation, for not going to his funeral. I'm finally able to type things like this without crying, but I don't know if the guilt will ever go away. He was such a wonderful person and I didn't get to ever say goodbye or thank you. I was in an abusive relationship with someone I loved with my entire heart. I would have done anything for him. Heck, I stayed with him through so much. I hurt him a fair amount too, but it pained me when I realized he didn't seem to fully understand what I went through for him, especially after what he did to me. I try to be fair in my assessment of what happened. Last I know of, he didn't give me that same respect, but it was a couple months ago. Who knows? Perhaps I can't understand the depth of what I did to him in light of my pain either. I could care less anymore. I want him to forget I existed, so he can heal and be happy again. I spent an entire month not eating or sleeping because we'd constantly break up or go through some shit. I couldn't swallow food, so I had to drink a smoothie a day just to get nutrients in me. I tried eating my favorite foods. I could barely stomach a French fry. I'd take 2 melatonin tablets and still be unable to sleep, leading into me running on 2 to 4 hours of sleep a day or two. I would spend every night sleepless because if I fell asleep, I'd dream that I'd be back with my ex, and I'd wake up happy for a couple minutes before it had hit me that he's gone. I'd usually fall asleep around 4 AM. Imagine feeling that loss over and over, having someone you loved with your entire heart come back, then tell you something like I love you, but I can't put in effort in our relationship, or you trained me to not worry about you and leave you, only to come back again, over and over. I think we had 4 to 5 breakups that month. I hit rock bottom when he told me he used me for 6 and broke up with me. The next day I was suicidal. After an entire month of enduring everything he threw at me, he told me he used me for my body and that we're over. I was failing 3 classes because I could barely function. I was disappointing professors that I respected. I couldn't remember the last time I ate or slept normally, and the person I loved the most is leaving me again after he told me he used me for my body. If my parents found out, they would make me transfer back home, and I'd be back in an unhealthy home environment. He freaked out. I guess he saw how bad the situation was for me to give up. I couldn't force myself to move. I couldn't see a way out. I just quietly accepted that my life was over, and it scared him to see that. Seeing the light go out of someone is scarier than someone breaking down and crying or lashing out, I suppose. I never drank before. It was a milestone for me, and I planned to have strawberry champagne with my ex when I was 21 to celebrate. He gave me ginger, 35% alcohol, and told me that if I drank it, it'd calm down my heart rate. I thought, hell, I have nothing left to lose. I'll take it. I drank some, and I felt better. I don't remember why, but I laughed. He told me I was cute and my laugh was higher pitched, and God, I felt warmth from him again. I just wanted to chase that. I drank more and more. I'd estimate 6 shots since I drank from the bottle that he handed me. He fucked me when I was drunk. It's hard for me to register that it was rape because I loved him so much that I would have given him consent even when drunk. But with all this context, it's an extremely fucked up situation. I usually just call it him taking advantage of me when really, it's rape. But labels don't really matter because I'm not gonna do anything with it. I'm in a better place. I regret not leaving when I should have, because we blindly thought we could fix things when he couldn't seem to understand the weight of what happened, and I couldn't move past or forgive the things he'd done. I asked for a break to heal a couple times and he wouldn't let me leave, even pulling over the side of the road until I agreed not to go on a break. I ended up lashing out at him. I treated him terribly in the end, and I can easily admit that. I feel remorse and guilt for my words, of course. My friends argue that I reacted the way an abused victim should, but I know that what I should have done was leave, since staying with him made me unable to heal. I couldn't process my pain. This chapter is closed, and I'm at peace. I haven't felt a single urge to text him this entire breakup. I hope he feels the same. I'm healing. I have friends and things to do, and I feel a contentment I haven't felt in a long time. Closure comes from within. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.